The heat was oppressive, an invisible weight that crushed every inch of skin beneath the bulletproof vest. The sun was already setting behind the concrete towers of the favela, turning the sky a dirty orange as the team moved in tight formation through alleys so narrow that two men could barely fit side by side. On the radio, there was only a hiss. The signal, swallowed up by the brick walls and improvised antennas, was almost useless. It was supposed to be a clean entrance, a hit and run. But in that forgotten part of town, plans never survived the first step into the alleys. Private Miguel knew this, or rather, he felt it. His stomach churned, his eyes scanning every rooftop, every shadow, as if the bricks themselves could pull him in. He was young, but he wasn't stupid. He had a nose for danger. When the first shots tore through the silence, dry, sharp, Miguel spun quickly, gun pointed, looking for cover. The team spread out, order in chaos. But in the confusion, something went wrong. Very wrong. Miguel turned a corner, and suddenly he was alone. No radio, no visual of colleagues, no reinforcement, just him and them. The sound of heavy footsteps, someone's breathing very close, muffled, urgent, the sound of guns being cocked, and then silence again. The kind of silence that makes time stand still. Cornered but still invisible, Miguel hid behind a pile of rubble, his finger firmly on the trigger, his heart hammering in his chest like a war drum. There, in the dirty labyrinth of the favela, the real operation began, survival, and each second seemed to stretch like an eternity. Now check if you are already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the best of police operations. The training had not prepared Miguel for that. In the barracks, the instructors shouted, pushed, and simulated ambushes, but it was easy to know that it was all an act. Here, in the middle of that tangle of alleys and alleys, death was real, so real that it seemed like it could be. Touched, smelled, sweat ran down his back. Every step had to be calculated. One wrong move, one more noise, and the ground would become the scene of an inevitable shootout. Up above, in the broken windows, he saw rapid movements. Children? Sentinels? Impossible to tell. The sergeant's voice echoed in his mind. Trust no one. Not silence. Not light. Especially not light. And Miguel continued crawling in the darkness while the drug dealers began to approach. They knew there was a cop there. The smell of tension in the air was palpable, like gasoline about to be ignited. He had to think fast. He had to move even better. But where to? And how long until it is discovered? Miguel pressed his back against the thick cement wall, cracked by the humidity. He breathed through his mouth, controlling each breath as he had learned in training. But now, every noise seemed to echo like thunder in his head. The favela moved around him, alive, pulsating, like a beast that knew exactly where its prey was hiding. Footsteps, voices whispered in codes he didn't fully understand, pirate radios blaring rapid orders. The hunt had begun, and he was the prize. With no other option, Miguel moved forward. Every corner was a Russian roulette. Every shadow could be his last. On the floor he saw empty cartridges, dried blood, marks of recent shots on the walls, signs that death had danced there hours before. Focus, soldier. You were trained for this. The gun held steady in his hands, the tip sweeping. The corners like a silent beacon. Then he saw it, a gap between two shacks, a narrow passage that might lead him back to the security perimeter, but to reach it, he would have to cross an open alley. And someone was watching. In the window of a two-story house, between filthy curtains, the barrel of an improvised machine gun, pointed, motionless, like the eye of a predator. If he ran, he would be shot. If he stayed, he would be surrounded. His time was running out, and Miguel, even as a rookie, knew sometimes survival is a brutal choice. It took momentum, and he ran. The first shot tore through the air so close that Miguel felt the shard of concrete hitting his cheek. He dove to the ground, rolling towards the alley. The impact of his shoulder hitting the ground knocked the air from his lungs, but he didn't stop. In an instinctive movement he got up and ran again, crossing the alley in a zigzag pattern as he had learned in tactical training. More gunshots, screams, the bandits. Radios burst with messages. PM alone, reinforce the area, don't let them escape. Miguel knew the favela was closing in around him. Streets blocked, armed men appearing from all sides. No infinite ammo, no reinforcements. The recruit turned the first corner and in a desperate act kicked a half-open door. The old wood gave way and he fell inside a dark, smelly shack full of trash and broken furniture. Inside, silence, at least for now. Miguel hid behind an overturned refrigerator, breathing heavily, listening to the sound of the hunt. Become invisible, he thought. This is not the time to be a hero. This is the time to survive. Outside, footsteps multiplied, the sound of loaders being hitched. One small mistake, and it would be just another body lost in the statistics. He needed to think like them. If he wanted to live, he would have to become the monster himself. Minutes that seemed like hours. Miguel, dirty, bleeding from small cuts, calculated. He couldn't stay in the same place for too long. They were searching every house, every hole, and sooner or later they would get there. In a quick impulse, he searched the house. He found an old torn backpack. Inside, some worn-out clothes, a dirty cap. The plan formed in his mind. Disguise, blend in, survive. He took off his sweaty, heavy vest and put on his local clothes. He hid the gun under his old t-shirt. He put his cap on his head. Dirty and staggering, he now looked like just another junkie, a nobody lost in. The alleys. He opened the back door and walked out, slowly, limping, his heart pounding in his chest. He passed two armed men. One of them glanced over. His gaze was hard, suspicious. Miguel's finger tightened on his hidden holster, ready to pull it out and fight for his life if necessary. But the drug dealer just spat on the ground and turned away. Michael kept walking, each step an abyss between life and death. And he knew he was not saved yet, not even close. Miguel followed the alley like a ghost, blending into the alleys, dodging glances, struggling not to show the tension that was eating away at his nerves. The light from the makeshift lamps cast yellow stains on the ground, while the sky darkened quickly, swallowed by the hot, heavy night. If he could get to 2nd Street, the main street, he might find a way out of the siege. But the path was a web of traps. At the top of a hill he saw it. Improvised barricades, burning barrels, groups of armed men with radios in their ears and eyes cutting through the darkness like headlights, blockades. All escape points were sealed. Iron perimeter, thought Miguel. Perfect trap. It wasn't enough to just run. They were waiting for it. They wanted him to try. I wanted desperation to make him come out of his hiding place. And then I would just have to pull the trigger. Miguel leaned against a peeling wall hidden by the shadows. He pulled out his cell phone. It still had 2% battery. No signal, no radio, no contact, no rescue. It was him against the system, and the death clock was already marking its last beats. The wind carried the smell of sewage, gunpowder, and fear. Miguel was determined to find another route, even if he had to dig with his own hands. As he crossed an even narrower alley, he heard the click of a door being opened. Instinctively he turned and drew his gun, taking aim. But he wasn't a drug dealer. He was an old man, thin as a blade, with sunken eyes and an unshaven beard. A resident. He raised his hands slowly, his eyes glued to the gun Miguel was pointing at. Calm down, boy. I'm not one of them," whispered the old man. "You want to leave, don't you?" Miguel didn't lower the gun. "Who are you?" he growled, his finger firmly on the trigger. "Just an old man who got tired of seeing innocent blood running down this floor." The old man took a cautious step back. "I know a way to get you out of here, a way that not even they know about." Miguel hesitated. It was risky. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe he was handing over his own life on a silver platter, but standing still was certain death. Decision made. Miguel slowly lowered his gun but kept his gaze sharp as a blade. "Show me. Now." The old man smiled, a sad, scarred smile. and motioned for Miguel to follow him. And so the two disappeared through the favela while the hunt intensified. The path was a maze of ruins, forgotten alleys and makeshift stairs. Miguel followed the old man in silence, attentive to every sound, every shadow. His instinct screamed that something was wrong, and deep down he knew, in the favela, no one helps for free. When they reached a small abandoned warehouse, the old man stopped, looked around and whispered, "From now on, it's up to you." Before Miguel could respond, he heard the metallic click of a charger being engaged. Betrayal. From the alleys around, 5 armed men emerged, guns pointed, cold smiles on their sweaty faces. The old man stepped back, hands raised, muttering, "I had no choice, boy. Forgive me." Miguel didn't think, he didn't hesitate. He turned to the left, fired 2 quick shots, one at the knees of the first bandit, the other at the lamp that illuminated the place. The world was plunged into darkness. Screams, shots piercing the darkness. Miguel moved like a shadow, trained to fight in the dark, using every sound, every breath of his enemies to orient himself. He fired again, accurately, knocking down another drug dealer who was stumbling as he tried to aim. Blood, gunpowder, and adrenaline saturated the air. The recruit advanced. He fought, surviving with what he had, instinct, training, and pure fear. Every step, a battle, every breath, a victory. Miguel fell, rolled, shot. The body seemed to act on its own, on the border between reason and instinct. With 2 enemies down and the others retreating to regroup, he saw his chance. A dark corridor behind the warehouse, a narrow tunnel made to drain sewage. Without thinking twice, he dove in. The smell was unbearable. The darkness was total, but it was his only chance. Crawling through the mud and trash, Miguel moved forward. He heard gunshots behind him, distant echoes, screams of rage. But ahead, the sound of cars, of familiar voices, the police perimeter salvation. The tunnel ended in a rusty grate. Without time to think, Miguel forced, kicked, pushed with his shoulder until the old structure gave way. He fell out, rolling on the dirty asphalt of the favela's side road. In front, men in black, heavily armed, shouted, "Police! Hands on your head!" Miguel raised his hands, exhausted, covered in blood, mud and dust. Rescue had arrived, but he knew, deep down, that he would never be the same again. The glare of the flashlights and the sound of boots on the asphalt were the last things Miguel saw before he passed out. When he opened his eyes hours later, he was on a makeshift stretcher, under the cold light of a medical tent set up on the perimeter. The smell of alcohol, blood and gunpowder permeated the air. Sergeants walked by, shouting orders. Doctors stitched wounds. Soldiers exchanged silent glances of survivors. Miguel tried to get up, but the pain pulled him back to the bed. The doctor next door just shook his head. "Calm down, warrior. You've fought enough for today." And in that moment, as he felt his own body aching, the penny dropped. He had survived. But at the same time, something inside him had died in that favela. Innocence, the idea that courage was enough. In the dirty mirror next to the stretcher, Miguel saw the reflection of a face he barely recognized. Sunken eyes, distant gaze, marks that time would not erase. Outside, the city remained indifferent. Another night, another operation, more statistics to fill reports. For Miguel, however, every alley, every shadow of that favela would be forever engraved in his memory. He came back, but it was never the same again. And somewhere, in the alleys of concrete and blood, the footsteps of the recruit who, for one night, became a legend among the living, and the dead still echoed. Did you like the content? I would appreciate if you like it. Would you have done anything differently in the recruit situation? I would like to see your opinion in the comments. I wait for you on the next mission. See you next time.